I thought I was making the right choice. I thought I was in control. But when the silver coins hit my hands, I knew I had made the worst mistake of my life. My name is Judas. You know me as a traitor, a name cursed, a man despised. But once, I was a disciple, one of the 12. I walked with Jesus. I sat at his feet. I saw his miracles with my own eyes. And yet, I betrayed him. Maybe you wonder why. Maybe you think I was just a greedy man, a man who sold his soul for a handful of silver. But it was never just about the money. It was about him, about the man I had followed for years, about the Messiah I had believed in. At first, I thought he would change everything. When Jesus called me to follow him, I thought I was joining a movement, something powerful, something unstoppable. He spoke of the kingdom of God. He performed signs and wonders. He had the crowds, the influence, the devotion of the people. I thought, this is it. This is the man who will lead us. This is the man who will finally take back our land, overthrow the Romans, bring justice to Israel. But as time went on, I started to doubt. He talked about suffering, about being rejected, about dying. He had power. I had seen it. He could command storms, raise the dead, feed thousands with nothing. And yet, he refused to use that power against our enemies. Instead of standing against Rome, he said, "Love your enemies." Instead of crushing the corrupt leaders, he said, "Turn the other cheek." This wasn't what I had signed up for, and I wasn't the only one who thought so. The others whispered too. They didn't say it out loud, but I saw it in their eyes when Jesus spoke of his death. Confusion, frustration, doubt. Then, one day, the priests came to me. They were waiting in the shadows of the temple courts, their robes whispering against the stone as they leaned in close. "You follow him," they said. "You know his movements, where he sleeps, where he prays." I said nothing. They smiled. 30 silver coins. That's what we'll give you. Just lead us to him. Just make it easy. I told myself it wasn't betrayal. I told myself Jesus had brought this on himself, that he was never going to take the throne, that he was leading us nowhere. So I took the money. I took matters into my own hands, and I thought I had won. The room was warm, the air thick with the scent of roasted lamb and bitter herbs. We sat together, the 12 of us, reclining around the table as we had done many times before. But tonight felt different. I could barely eat, barely speak, because I knew what I had done. The silver weighed heavy in my pouch, though I hadn't dared touch it since the priests placed it in my hands. It felt like carrying a stone in my chest, pressing down, crushing me. I had made my choice. But why did it feel like I had already lost? Jesus broke the bread, handed it to us, and spoke, "Take and eat. This is my body." His voice was steady, calm, as if nothing was wrong, as if he didn't know what I was about to do. But then, he lifted his cup. His eyes moved across the table, resting on each of us in turn, and his voice changed. "Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me." The room fell silent. My stomach twisted, my hands clenched under the table. No one spoke at first, but then came the whispers, the shifting glances, the wide, fearful eyes. One by one, they began to ask him, "Is it I, Lord?" "Surely not me, Rabbi." I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I had to ask too. I had to pretend. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Is it I, Rabbi?" And then, he looked at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. I stopped breathing. His eyes, there was no anger in them, no hatred, just sadness. "You have said so." I felt my fingers tighten into fists. The walls of the room seemed to close in. My skin burned. My mind screamed at me to leave, to run. Then, he spoke again. "What you are about to do, do quickly." A chill ran through me. The others looked at him in confusion, some glancing at me. They didn't understand, but I did. He knew. He had known all along. I rose to my feet, my legs weak beneath me, my head spun, my heart pounding against my ribs. I turned away from the table, away from the 12, away from him. The room behind me faded as I stepped into the night, and I walked toward the priests, toward betrayal, toward the worst mistake of my life. The silver was still in my pouch, but it felt heavier now. Every step I took toward Gethsemane felt like walking through water, my legs sluggish, my body weighed down by something I couldn't explain. Maybe it was fear, maybe regret, or maybe, deep down, I already knew the truth. The soldiers followed behind me, their torches flickering in the darkness, their armor clanking softly as they moved. The chief priests had sent their guards, along with Roman soldiers, too many for one man, too many for someone who had never even raised a hand in his own defense. But they didn't know him. Not like I did. He wouldn't run. He wouldn't fight. And that's what made this so easy and so hard. I clenched my teeth, my fingers brushing the small bag of silver at my side. You made your choice, Judas. The garden was just ahead now. The trees stretched upward, shadows twisting beneath them in the dim torchlight. And there, just beyond the clearing, I saw him. Jesus. He was waiting for me. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't afraid. He knew. He had always known. I stopped walking. Something inside me screamed, "Turn around. Stop this. Undo it before it's too late." But the soldiers behind me shifted impatiently, gripping their weapons, waiting for the signal. I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." The words felt like poison in my mouth. My hands were shaking as I stepped forward. The others, the disciples, they stirred, murmuring in confusion. I could hear Peter shift beside him, always ready to defend, but Jesus lifted a hand and silenced them. He was still, calm, waiting. I forced a smile onto my lips, a hollow, empty thing. And then I leaned in. The moment my lips touched his cheek, something inside me shattered. His eyes met mine as I pulled away, and in that single instant, the weight of what I had done crushed me. The silver in my pouch felt like it was burning through my robe. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "Judas, do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. The moment was broken by the sound of soldiers moving in. They seized him, rough hands, chains, torches flaring in the night. The disciples scattered. Some ran, some fought. Peter lunged, sword flashing, and for a moment chaos erupted. But Jesus stopped it. "Put your sword away," he said. "Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" He let them take him, and I just stood there, watching. My stomach twisted, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my sin. I stayed in the shadows. I told myself I had to see how this ended. The priests dragged him through the streets, the torches flickering off the stone walls, casting twisted shadows against the buildings. The crowd had gathered quickly, people whispering, pointing, sneering. I followed at a distance, my hood pulled low, my hands shaking at my sides. This wasn't what I had imagined. I thought he would fight back. I thought he would prove himself. Call down fire from heaven, summon legions of angels, end this with power. But he didn't. He let them take him. And now, here he was, standing before the priests, silent. The room was thick with tension. The high priest glared down at him, his voice sharp, demanding, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of God?" I leaned forward, waiting. This is it. This is the moment he proves them all wrong. But Jesus, he just stood there. He didn't beg, didn't argue, didn't even try to defend himself. "Are you the king of the Jews?" someone else shouted. The silence stretched, and then, finally, he spoke. "You say that I am." A whisper of gasps, murmurs of shock, and then the room exploded. Angry voices, shouts, spit flying through the air. And then came the first slap. Hard, loud. His head snapped to the side, but he didn't move. Another hit, then another. A guard grabbed a handful of his hair, jerking his head back. Someone punched him in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping, but he didn't fall. And they laughed, mocking him, taunting him, spitting in his face. I gripped the wall beside me, my fingernails digging into the stone. My stomach turned. This wasn't what I had agreed to. This wasn't justice. They didn't want a trial. They wanted blood. I turned away, trying to steady my breath, trying to silence the pounding in my skull. "It's not my fault," I whispered. "It's not my fault." But the words felt hollow, because deep down, I knew. This was my doing, my betrayal, my silver. I had handed him over, and now they were killing him. I swallowed hard, bile rising in my throat. The noise of the beating, the shouts, the laughter, it all blurred together. And in that moment, I realized something. The priests never wanted justice. They just wanted him dead. I staggered back, pressing myself into the wall, my breath coming in short gasps. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. And for the first time, a terrible, undeniable truth settled into my soul. I had made a mistake, and there was no way to undo it. The silver felt heavier now. I poured the coins into my hands, letting them clink together, their cold metal pressing into my skin. 30 pieces. It had seemed like so much before. A fortune. Enough to start over, to build a new life. Now, they felt like stones, or worse, like chains. I clenched my fists around them, my breath uneven. My mind kept trying to reason, trying to justify. Jesus had to be stopped. This was the right thing. But no matter how many times I told myself that, I couldn't silence the voice in my head. His voice, his words at the table. "What you are about to do, do quickly." His voice in the garden. "Judas, do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" And worst of all, his eyes. Not angry, not afraid, just sad. I tried to shake the image away, but it wouldn't leave me. It clung to me, like the filth on the hands of the men who had beaten him. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Then, in the distance, I heard it. A crowd, cheering. I turned my head sharply, my pulse quickening. Jesus. I moved without thinking, my feet dragging me toward the temple, toward the priests, toward the men who had promised me that this was right. But I knew now. It wasn't. I stumbled through the doors, my chest heaving. The priests stood in their robes, whispering among themselves, satisfied, pleased. I hated them in that moment. I shoved the silver into their hands, my voice raw, desperate. "I have sinned," I cried. "I have betrayed innocent blood." The words tumbled out before I could stop them, before I could think. I had betrayed innocent blood. The weight of it crashed over me. I had betrayed the only innocent man I had ever known. The priests glanced at each other, and then they laughed. One of them smirked, curling his fingers around the silver. "That is your problem." That was it. That was all they said. My problem, not theirs. They had what they wanted. Jesus was as good as dead. The coins slipped from my hands, scattering across the stone floor. The sound echoed through the chamber, metal clinking, rolling, spinning, before settling into silence. I waited for one of them to stop me, to tell me I was wrong, to tell me that there was some way to fix this, some way to make it right. But none of them looked at me. I was nothing to them. I was alone. And for the first time, I realized, not even the silver could save me now. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran. Through the streets, past the jeering crowds, past the merchants who bartered as if nothing had changed, past the beggars who still stretched out their hands, unaware that the world was falling apart. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. My legs felt weak beneath me, but I couldn't stop. I was suffocating. Jesus' words echoed in my head, over and over and over again. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to that man who betrays him. It would have been better for him if he had never been born. I clutched my ears, gasping, trying to drown out his voice. But it wouldn't leave me. It would have been better if I had never been born. He knew. He had always known. And still, he let me follow him. Still, he shared meals with me. He let me walk beside him. He washed my feet. He called me friend. And I repaid him with a kiss. I staggered, my vision blurring. My head pounded. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. There was no undoing this. No amount of silver thrown to the ground could buy back what I had done. No priest, no law, no sacrifice could erase my sin. I had given him over to death, and now I was alone. I stumbled out of the city, my feet dragging through the dust. The weight of my failure pressed down on me, crushing me, suffocating me. Then, in the distance, I saw it. A tree. A twisted, gnarled thing, its branches stretching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. I walked toward it. Slow. Steady. I could still hear the faint echoes of the city behind me. People shouting, people laughing, people who would forget me before the sun had set. Because that's what I was now. Nothing. A name that would only be spoken in hatred. A man whose story would be told as a warning. I stood beneath the tree, my fingers gripping the rough bark. Tears burned down my face. I was wrong, I whispered. My chest shook. My whole body trembled. I was so wrong. I looked up one last time, and then darkness. Darkness. Silence. This is all that's left of me now, but my mind still lingers. My thoughts still whisper. My regret still burns. What if I had waited? What if I had believed? Would things have been different? I see it now, so clearly, the thing I never saw before. Jesus was never meant to take a throne of gold. He was never meant to rule with armies or swords. His kingdom was not of this world. And his death, it wasn't a mistake. It was the plan all along. The priests thought they had won. The Romans thought they had crushed him. I thought I had ended him. But I was wrong. So wrong. Because 3 days later, he rose. The stone was rolled away. The tomb was empty. Death itself couldn't hold him. I never saw it. I never saw his hands, still scarred but alive. Never heard him call my name, the way he had called for Peter. Peter. He denied Jesus 3 times. 3 times. He ran, just like I did. He abandoned him, just like I did. But Peter found mercy. Peter found forgiveness, because he turned back. I could have done the same. I could have run to him instead of away. I could have fallen at his feet, begged for mercy. And I know now, he would have given it, even to me, even to the one who betrayed him. But I didn't wait. I thought my sin was too great. I thought my failure was final. I thought 30 silver coins would give me what I wanted. But they only bought me regret. If only I had waited. If only I had believed. If only I had turned back. But now, it is too late. My name is Judas, and this was my story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. May God bless you.